Layla Munro never expected the day she stood up for herself to be the day her life exploded. It was during a family reunion, the kind where everyone smiles for the cameras and pretends everything's fine. But in front of 39 relatives, her father, Frank Mallory, punched her in the face. She'd had enough. For years, Frank's anger had controlled their home like a ticking time bomb. This time, though, Layla wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. The worst part? Her mother, Catherine, laughed. Her brother, Kyle, clapped and said, "Serves you right." They never saw it coming. The girl they'd ignored, belittled, and pushed around for decades had just snapped. And she was about to tear apart everything they cared about. That night, Layla made 3 phone calls, 3 decisions that would change her family forever. Growing up in Westchester, New York, Layla was always expected to be perfect. The colonial townhouse looked straight out of a magazine. A perfectly manicured lawn, a white picket fence, everything pristine. But behind closed doors, the house was a war zone. Frank Mallory built his property management firm from the ground up. His success meant respect, at least that's what he demanded. And Layla, she was never enough. Every day she had to walk on eggshells. One wrong word, one wrong move, and the storm would hit. Frank's anger was like a dark cloud, hovering over everything, but it was hidden from the world. To his friends, his colleagues, he was a pillar of strength. At home, he ruled with an iron fist, demanding respect with no regard for anyone else's needs. Layla's mother, Catherine, was the perfect suburban housewife. Blonde, always perfectly styled, always ready with a smile for anyone who stepped through the door. But behind the facade, she was Frank's enabler, doing whatever it took to maintain the image of the perfect family. "Your father works so hard for this family," she'd say every time Layla's tears fell. "The least you can do is not upset him." But that was the breaking point. That was when Layla decided to take control. She knew it was time to stop playing the role she'd been assigned. The family might have thought they'd won, but Layla was finally done living for them. She wasn't going to be the doormat anymore. It wasn't just about a punch in the face. It was about finally reclaiming her voice. It was about showing them who she really was. The quiet girl they ignored had just become their worst nightmare. You know how he gets. Then there was my brother Kyle Mallory, 3 years older and the undisputed golden child. He followed our father into business, joining his company straight out of college. While I struggled for a single word of praise, Kyle Mallory received constant affirmation. "That's my boy," Dad would say, clapping Kyle Mallory on the back after he shared even the most basic accomplishment. "You've got the Gordon business sense." My academic achievements never earned similar recognition. When I graduated with honors from Northwestern with a double major in finance and economics, my father simply nodded and said, "Let's hope you can actually do something with that." I remember sitting in my dorm room after that comment, staring at my diploma and wondering why I still tried so hard to earn his approval. Yet some desperate part of me never stopped seeking it. Despite the dismissal of my educational accomplishments, I built a solid career as a financial analyst. Each firm I worked for was more prestigious than the last, as I climbed the ladder through talent and determination rather than family connections. Still, at our mandatory Sunday dinners, my professional accomplishments were treated as cute diversions until I would settle down with the right man. Layla Munro's playing at being a businesswoman, my mother would tell her friends at charity events I was obligated to attend. But she'll find the right man eventually. She's just a late bloomer. These comments stung, especially as I moved into more senior positions that demanded 60-hour work weeks and complete commitment. My relationship suffered under the weight of my career and my family's disapproval. My last boyfriend, Thomas, ended things after 6 months when I canceled our weekend getaway to help my mother plan a garden party. "You'll never prioritize anyone over your family," he said as he packed his things. "And the sad thing is, they don't even appreciate it." He was right. Layla Munro sat inside her new glass-walled office, sunlight flickering off the towers of Westchester. The scent of rain lingered from the morning storm. Her pen tapped against the desk. Slow, rhythmic, nervous. Then came the buzz. Her phone lit up. An email. From Frank Mallory. But it wasn't meant for her. She'd been accidentally copied on a thread between her father and Blackwood's CEO. Her eyes scanned the screen. A single line stopped her breath. "She's always been unstable. That breakdown in college, we covered it up." The words blurred. Her hand froze mid-tap. The hum of executives down the hall grew louder, sharper. Her chest tightened. Cold panic. Then clarity. This wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. Her own father had weaponized her past to sabotage her credibility, not just as a daughter, but as a professional. The mask of family had cracked, and behind it was something far colder. She had spent years chasing his approval. Every promotion, every late night, every sacrifice, measured against the hope that maybe, just maybe, Frank Mallory would finally say, "I'm proud of you." Instead, he'd turned her trauma into a punchline. 2 months earlier, Layla had accepted a senior role at Blackwood Financial. The offer was everything she'd worked for. Double the salary, a team that respected her, and a firm known for its ethics. But Blackwood occasionally competed with her father's property management firm. Not directly, but enough that she knew he'd see it as disloyal. Still, she chose herself. For once. She waited until the annual family reunion to share the news. 40 relatives gathered in their Victorian townhouse. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and lemon polish. She wore navy blue. Lipstick perfect. Her armor. Her mother greeted her with a tight smile. "Layla, dear, you finally made it." Inside, the house buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Kyle Mallory, her older brother, stood near the fireplace, surrounded by praise. He'd followed Frank into business, straight out of college. Every minor success was met with applause. "That's my boy," Frank would say, clapping Kyle's back. Layla's own achievements. Graduating with honors from Northwestern, a double major in finance and economics. Frank had glanced at her diploma and said, "Let's hope you can actually do something with that." She remembered sitting alone in her dorm room, staring at that piece of paper, wondering why she still tried, why she still cared. But she did. She built her career without shortcuts. No family connections, just grit. Still, at Sunday dinners, her work was dismissed. "She's playing at being a businesswoman," her mother would whisper to friends. "She'll find the right man eventually. She's just a late bloomer." Those words stung, especially when her job demanded 60-hour weeks. When her last boyfriend left, saying, "You'll never prioritize anyone over your family. And the sad thing is, they don't even appreciate it." He was right. Layla had kept her distance, physically at least, but emotionally, she was still tethered. Every win was weighed against the hope of earning Frank's respect. Until now. Now she knew. The betrayal wasn't just silence, it was sabotage. She looked out at the skyline. The glass walls no longer felt transparent. They felt like armor. She wouldn't shrink, she wouldn't retreat. She would expose the truth. And this time, she wouldn't ask for permission. "That dress is a bit formal for a family gathering, isn't it? And you look thin. Are you eating properly?" Before I could answer, she was already turning away, calling out to my Aunt Patricia about the new caterer she had hired. Some things never changed. I made my way through the house, stopping to greet relatives I hadn't seen since the previous year. Uncle Robert and Aunt Jean asked about my job, seeming genuinely interested until Kyle Mallory appeared, sliding his arm around my shoulders with false camaraderie. "Little sister is still playing with spreadsheets," he announced with a chuckle that diminished my entire career to a child's game. Meanwhile, I just closed the Henderson account. 7 figures potential for 8 next year. "That's wonderful, Kyle Mallory," Aunt Jean said immediately, shifting her attention to him. "Your father must be so proud." I extracted myself from his grip and moved toward the back patio where my father held court. He was telling one of his business war stories to a captive audience of male relatives, tumbler of scotch in hand. When he saw me, he gave a brief nod before continuing his story without pause. Throughout the afternoon, small moments of dismissal accumulated like paper cuts. When I mentioned a financial strategy I had developed for a client, my mother interrupted to ask if I had found anyone special yet. When I helped in the kitchen, my aunt wondered aloud why such a pretty girl was still single at her age. When I joined a conversation about market trends, Kyle Mallory talked over me until I fell silent. The worst moment came when I overheard my parents in the kitchen as I was returning from the bathroom. "Layla Monroe looks tired," my mother said. "All work and no personal life is aging her. If she had Kyle Mallory's business sense, maybe the work would be worth it," my father replied. "But she's always been soft, too concerned with ethics and feelings rather than results. That's why she'll never make it to the top." The sharp scent of lemon oil on polished wood mingled with laughter drifting from the living room. Layla Monroe, age 9, crouched beside the banister, heart racing as her father's voice echoed with palpable disappointment. Fingers pressed against the grain of the banister, she felt herself shrink, wishing she could melt into the wallpaper. The weight of expectation crushed her voice, her heart pounding so loud she feared someone might hear. Decades later, the smell still lingered, a ghost of pain, but also a reminder of the strength she had fought to reclaim. I froze in the hallway, their words hitting harder than they knew. 13 years of building my career, and yet I stood as the family disappointment in their eyes. At 4:30 p.m., my mother announced dinner would be served at 6 sharp in the formal dining room. As relatives drifted off to freshen up, I retreated to my old bedroom, now a guest room devoid of my past. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. Who was this accomplished woman? It couldn't be the same soft girl they dismissed. I had earned my success through intelligence, resilience, and hard work. But why was I still yearning for their approval? The shift within me was electric. I would make my announcement at dinner, not for validation, but to declare my independence. No more shrinking to fit their mold. Downstairs, the formal dining room sparkled under the chandelier, my mother's best china glinting like my family's facade of perfection. The table was a battlefield of social hierarchy with mine placed at the far end. My father commanded the head of the table, flanked by Kyle Mallory and my mother, the unyielding gatekeepers of the Gordon family. As servers brought out the first course, conversations bubbled and bounced like overcooked pasta. Aunt Patricia's daughter was having a second child. Cousin William had snagged a vacation home in the Hamptons. Uncle David's son was Princeton-bound. I sat in the eye of this storm, soup spoon still, waiting for my moment. It arrived during a lull in conversation, a fleeting moment where everyone focused on cutting their perfectly cooked steaks. My heart hammered, anticipation surging through me. "Excuse me, everyone." The room fell silent, forks poised midair. Would they hear me? A chill swept over me as the power dynamics shifted, just for a moment. "I have something to say." "I have some news I'd like to share," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. 40 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. "I've accepted a new position," I added, sitting taller. "Senior financial strategist at Blackwood Financial." The room froze. My father's fork hit the plate with a sharp clink. "Blackwood," he repeated, his voice low, dangerous. "They're not a direct competitor, Dad," I quickly corrected. "They have some overlap, sure, but different clients, different approach." His face reddened. "Different approaches, indeed," he sneered. "They're just another flashy firm, making promises they can't keep." "They're known for ethical practices and transparency," I said, before I could stop myself. "Their client retention rate is the highest in the industry because they deliver consistent results without tricks." The table fell silent. No one ever challenged Frank Mallory Gordon, especially not his own daughter. "Are you implying something about my business?" His voice dropped to that cold tone, the one that always made me freeze. I should have backed down. I'd been backing down for 32 years, but not this time. Not today. "I'm not implying anything about your business, Dad," I said, heart racing but steady. "I'm telling you about mine, about an opportunity I've earned on my own, through talent and hard work, not connections. For once, could you just say, 'Congratulations'?" The silence stretched, unbearable. I could hear the clink of ice in glasses, the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father's face shifted through shades of red as he processed my words. Was this it? Had I finally crossed a line? The air was thick, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Was this a victory? Or was I about to lose everything? The tension in the room was palpable, a thick fog of unspoken conflict. Forks scraped against fine china, the sound slicing through the thick air like a knife. Layla Monroe's heart raced, each thump echoing louder as all eyes turned to Frank. His jaw clenched, silent fury radiating from him. Just as Layla Monroe inhaled, ready to stand her ground, the chandelier above trembled, as if anticipating the next verbal blow. "Congratulations," he finally uttered, his tone deceptively smooth, masking the storm brewing beneath. "You expect praise for betraying your family? For taking everything I taught you and handing it to my competitors?" Layla Monroe fought hard to keep her voice steady. "This isn't about betrayal. It's about my future. Blackwood is giving me the chance to make a real impact." Frank's voice rose, fueled by indignation. "You're using inside knowledge you gathered sitting at this table," he shot back. A hush fell over the relatives, their discomfort palpable. Eliza fixated on her plate, and Uncle Robert fiddled with his tie, avoiding the escalating confrontation. "That's absurd. I've built my career based on my skills and reputation, not your secrets." Her mom intervened, placing a hand gently on Frank's arm. "Maybe Layla Monroe didn't fully think this through," she said, her voice steady, but her words ignited a firestorm. "I'm not backing out," Layla Monroe declared, her resolve hardening like steel. "I signed the contract. I start in 2 weeks." Kyle Mallory chuckled, the sound brittle and laced with derision. "Classic Layla Monroe," he taunted. "Always thinking she's smarter than everyone, including Dad, who built a successful business for 30 years. I never claimed that. This is about my right to choose my path." Frank's voice boomed again, shaking the very walls of their Victorian townhouse. "You wouldn't even have this opportunity if I hadn't paid for your fancy education. You owe everything to this family." "No," Layla Monroe shot back, her frustration spilling over. "I worked through grad school, paid back every penny of my undergrad loans. My career is mine, built through my own efforts." How dare he try to stake claim over her future? The tension hung precariously, each heartbeat an echo of her defiance. Would she finally break free from the chains of his control, or would he twist her words into a weapon against her? Just as the silence deepened, she sensed something shift. Would someone step up, or would Layla Monroe have to fight this battle alone? Forks clattered and water trembled in shimmering arcs, echoing against Layla Monroe's steady, defiant breath. Frank Mallory's face, rigid with disbelief and rage, blurred as he rose, so fast his chair nearly toppled. Layla met his stare, pulse pounding, their silence crackling with unspoken tension. Who breaks first? The fortress of her father's authority, or the new steel in Layla's resolve? "You repay us by becoming a corporate traitor?" he thundered, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the crystal water glasses jump. The familiar accusation stung, designed to make her cower, to apologize. But something had fundamentally changed inside her. She was no longer the insecure daughter desperate for approval. She was a finance professional who had earned her success. "This is why I never tell you about my achievements," she snapped back, her voice strengthening. "You can't stand that I've succeeded on my own merits. I don't need your approval or your connections. I've built something for myself that has nothing to do with the Mallory name." The room fell quiet. Her mother gasped. "Layla, apologize to your father immediately." "For what? For having an independent thought? For building my own career? For refusing to pretend I'm less than I am to protect his ego?" Frank pushed back his chair so forcefully it toppled over, crashing against the floor. The sound echoed through the dining room as he stood, fists clenched at his sides. "You ungrateful little brat," he snarled with venom in his tone. "You think you've accomplished anything without the Mallory name behind you? You're nothing without this family." Eyes widened in shock from her relatives, but he was beyond hearing reason, transformed by rage into something monstrous. He stalked around the table, looming in front of her as family members shrank back in their chairs. Layla stood her ground, refusing to cower as years of denial burned away. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. Nothing was ever good enough. I'm done diminishing myself to soothe your ego." He reached her before anyone could intervene, but in retrospect, no one truly tried. The tension hung in the air, thick as smoke. What would happen next? Would he use his rage to crush her spirit once again? Or could Layla finally break free from his suffocating control? The moment stretched as an unsettling stillness gripped the room. Layla's heart raced. Would someone step up on her behalf? Or was she destined to fight this battle on her own? The answer loomed. Layla Monroe stood frozen, her hair damp with sweat and blood, the scent of roast duck still lingering in the air. The Victorian townhouse in Westchester had gone silent, except for the brittle sound of her mother's laugh. Her cheek throbbed. Her lip stung. Copper coated her tongue. Across the table, Frank Mallory sat stiff-backed, his expression carved from stone. No apology, no regret. Just control. Kyle Mallory leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Serves you right," he said, his voice sharp and smug. "Maybe that'll knock some sense into you." Layla's fingers trembled as she touched her swollen cheek. Her eyes scanned the room. 39 relatives. Not one moved, not one spoke, not one dared to challenge Frank. The white tablecloth beneath her dripped red. Her blood. Their silence. A perfect family portrait. Ruined. She turned slowly, walked past the untouched wine glasses, through the kitchen, out the side door. No one followed. No one called her name. The rain had started. Soft. Cold. The scent of wet leaves filled the air. She slid into her car, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only solid thing left. Her reflection in the rearview mirror showed the truth, her father's mark blooming across her cheek like a brand. But the pain wasn't what broke her. It was the realization. They had never seen her. Not really. Not when she graduated top of her class. Not when she built her own career in property management. Not when she stopped asking for their approval. She drove in silence. Her body moved on autopilot, guiding her to a hotel just 20 minutes away. Inside, the lobby smelled of lemon polish and old carpet. The clerk didn't look up, didn't ask, just slid the keycard across the counter. Layla took it. No tears, no words, just one thought pulsing through her mind. If no one would stand beside her, she'd stand alone, and next time, she'd make sure they listened. The room felt suffocating. Layla Monroe's reflection in the bathroom mirror told the brutal truth. A bruised cheek, a split lip. She didn't just look like a victim, she was one. For 32 years, she'd been the peacekeeper, the one who kept everything running smoothly. But tonight, her father, Frank Mallory, had shattered the illusion. A punch in front of 39 relatives. Laughter, mockery, and silence. No one cared. No one reached out. Layla stared at the empty phone screen. No messages. Not from her mother. Not from Aunt Jean, who'd always given her those pitying looks. The absence of concern hit harder than the blow itself. This wasn't a family. This was a performance. and she was nothing more than the backdrop. Ice pressed to her face, she let the memories flood in. The times she'd been overlooked, undermined. The way her accomplishments were ignored, her existence minimized. The times she'd been told to shrink herself. She had always given them the benefit of the doubt. But tonight, she was done. Layla reached for her phone. A vibration. But it wasn't from her family. It was Frank Mallory. The message was chillingly simple. No words, just a photo. His bruised knuckles in a mirror. Her heart dropped. A reversal. Frank, the misunderstood victim. The narrative was about to shift. He would paint himself as the one wronged. And Layla? She was nothing more than collateral damage. It wasn't just the pain anymore. It was the realization that her story, her truth, was being rewritten. Could she fight back? Could she reclaim the narrative? Or would she remain invisible forever? Layla Monroe had always been the quiet one, the one who sat in the back, who never caused a scene, who kept her head down and went along. But at 27, that silent role was no longer enough. She'd just been passed over for a promotion at her first financial firm, because her father, Frank Mallory, had called the managing director, told him she wasn't ready. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but it wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second. No, this was the moment when Layla realized things would never change unless she made them change. In her dimly lit office, she opened her laptop. What she found, buried deep in her father's company's files, was horrifying. Tax strategies that crossed ethical lines, misleading investment performance. Frank Mallory's empire, built on intimidation, was darker than she ever imagined. And yet, for years, family loyalty had kept her quiet. That loyalty had chained her, but no more. Layla had a choice. She could keep playing the role, silent, obedient, or she could stand up and expose the man who had controlled her life for far too long. He wasn't just a tyrant at home. Frank Mallory's actions in the business world were just as reckless, just as toxic. The ethical dilemma crushed her. Could she betray her family to save herself? Could she risk everything to expose the truth? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, the weight of her decision heavier than the bruises on her face from the night before. But as the rain tapped gently on the windows, Layla realized something. She didn't have to wait for permission. She didn't have to be the backdrop of his story anymore. It was her time now, her story, and she was going to make them listen. Would she expose the family empire, or would she remain the invisible daughter, swallowed up by a man who believed he controlled everything? This time, Layla Monroe wasn't backing down. Not anymore. Exposing my father would affect innocent employees at his firm. It would devastate my mother's social standing, the only currency she truly valued. It would destroy Kyle Mallory's inheritance and future. It would splinter the extended family into factions. But allowing the abuse to continue unchallenged would destroy me. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love and respect from people, incapable of giving either. The physical assault had merely made visible the violence that had always existed beneath the surface of our relationship. As midnight approached, I made 3 separate lists: people who could help me, potential consequences of action versus inaction, and what I hoped to achieve beyond simple revenge. By 1 in the morning, my decision was made. There were 3 phone calls I needed to make, 3 conversations that would set unstoppable forces in motion, 3 connections who could help me ensure that Frank Mallory Gordon would face consequences for his actions, both personal and professional. I set my phone on the nightstand and slept deeply for the first time in years. The decision bringing unexpected peace. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight I could rest, knowing I had finally chosen myself over family obligation. I woke early the next morning, my face throbbing, but my mind clear. The hotel room was silent, except for the distant hum of the air conditioning. I checked my phone again, still no messages from family. Their silence confirmed I was making the right decision. After showering and carefully applying concealer to the worst of the bruising, I sat at the small desk by the window and prepared to make the first call. The contact was saved in my phone simply as Michael C. Michael Chen was a senior investigator with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Division, someone I had met 3 years ago during an industry compliance conference. We had stayed in touch professionally, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss regulatory changes. I dialed his direct number, and he answered on the third ring. "Layla Monroe, this is unexpected. How are you?" His voice was warm but professional. "I've been better," I replied honestly. "Michael, I need to speak with you about something sensitive. Do you have time today for a meeting?" There was a brief pause. "Of course. Is this a professional matter or personal?" "Both," I said. "I have documentation of what I believe are serious financial improprieties at Gordon Financial Services." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father's company?" "Yes. This is a significant step." "Layla Monroe, are you certain you want to proceed?" "I am. What happened recently has made it impossible for me to remain silent." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near his office at 11 Suburban. Before ending the call, Michael added, "Document everything about your current situation. Take photographs. Write down exactly what occurred. This may become relevant." I followed his advice, using my phone to photograph my injuries from multiple angles, then writing a detailed account of the previous evening's events. The clinical process of documentation helped create emotional distance from the trauma. At precisely 11, I sat across from Michael in a quiet corner of the coffee shop. He winced visibly when he saw my face, the concealer, unable to completely hide the bruising. "I think we should start with what happened to you," he said quietly. I gave him a concise account of the family dinner, my father's violent reaction to my new job, and the disturbing responses from my mother and brother. As I spoke, Michael took notes, his expression becoming increasingly grave. "Have you filed a police report?" "Not yet. That's part of my second call today." He nodded. "Now, about the financial documentation you mentioned." I opened my laptop and showed him the files I had compiled. Layla Monroe stood frozen in the quiet hush after Michael left. The weight of the documents in her arms felt heavier with each beat of her pulse. She closed the office door behind her, listening for any trace of movement in the house. Her father's footsteps, the faint creak of the stairs. Outside, dusk thickened, wrapping the world in a dark veil. Then her phone buzzed, cutting through the silence like a warning. Was this the moment her world would finally unravel? Or would she find out just how far Frank Mallory would go to protect his secrets? The past few days had been a whirlwind of tension. Her father's violent outbursts, the cold distance from her mother and brother, the bruises she couldn't hide. Her father's empire had always been built on control, power, and the reputation he guarded with his life. But now, Layla was ready to fight back. She wasn't going to stay silent any longer. Not after what she had seen. Not after everything he had done. As she clicked through the files on her laptop, client fee manipulations, tax documents riddled with questionable deductions, emails that spoke of secrets she was never supposed to know, Layla knew this wasn't just about her family anymore. This was about exposing the truth. She had the proof. She had the courage. And she was done being invisible. When she met Michael at the coffee shop, his eyes scanned her bruised face, his voice low and concerned. "We need to take action," he said. "What you're doing, it takes extraordinary courage." Layla nodded, her mind made up. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Frank Mallory wouldn't go down without a fight, but Layla wasn't afraid of him anymore. As the investigation began, the weight of her father's secrets was about to crash down on everything he'd built. She wasn't just reclaiming her own life, she was exposing a legacy of lies. Would she finally break free from his control? Or was her fight just beginning? The phone buzzed again. Her heart raced. Would her father's wrath be the end of her, or her liberation? Layla Monroe stood outside Diana's office, her palms still damp from gripping the pen too tightly. The sky above Westchester was bruised violet, heavy with the scent of rain. Leaves rustled along the sidewalk as headlights streaked past, life moving forward, indifferent. Her phone buzzed again. James Wilson. She stared at the screen. Was she really ready to trust someone with everything her family had buried? Could she risk it, knowing what might unravel? Inside, the fluorescent lights had flickered as Diana leaned forward, voice steady. "We'll need to document every interaction, every attempt at contact." Layla nodded. "My family will close ranks. They'll deny everything, or twist it." "That's common," Diana said quietly, "but your injuries speak for themselves. And sometimes, when one person speaks up, others follow." 2 hours passed. The air grew colder. Diana photographed every bruise, every mark, each one a silent witness. The restraining order was drafted. "The sheriff will serve it within 24 hours, Diana said. "Your father will be legally barred from contacting you, or coming within 500 feet of your home or work. If he violates it, he'll be arrested." Layla stepped into the night, the wind brushing her face like a warning. Her third call was to James Wilson, the investigative journalist who had once quoted her anonymously in a piece on gender discrimination. He'd written about corruption in property management firms before. He knew the terrain. They met at a quiet restaurant near the waterfront, far from the polished glass towers of the financial district. James wore jeans and a button-down, no tie. A small gesture, but it meant something. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Layla, who did that to you?" "My father," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "And it's connected to what I need to tell you." Over lunch, she laid it all out. The firm her father built, Frank Mallory's empire, wasn't just successful. It was rotten. Manipulated fees, dubious tax filings, emails that hinted at deeper secrets. But beneath the spreadsheets and contracts was something darker. A family ruled by fear, a father obsessed with control, a legacy built on silence. "I've started the legal process," she said, "but this isn't just about courtrooms. It's about truth, about accountability." James listened. His expression shifted from concern to resolve. Outside, the rain finally broke. Soft drops tapped the window. Layla looked out, her reflection fractured in the glass. She had taken the first step, but the road ahead was steep. Her father wouldn't surrender quietly. His reputation was everything, and now it was under threat. Would Layla's voice be enough to shake the foundation he'd spent decades building? Or was this just the beginning of a war she couldn't yet see the end of? The scent of rain lingered in the air as Layla Monroe sat across from James Wilson, her fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The waterfront restaurant was nearly empty, just the clink of silverware and the low hum of traffic outside. She slid a flash drive across the table. Her hand trembled slightly. James picked it up, eyes narrowing as he inserted it into his laptop. The screen lit up. Spreadsheets, emails, contracts. But it wasn't just numbers. It was a map of betrayal, a blueprint of how Frank Mallory, her father, had built his property management empire on manipulation and silence. Outside, sirens echoed faintly. Layla stared at the screen. "Will this be enough?" she asked. James didn't answer right away. He scrolled, paused, scrolled again. "Your father's firm. This goes deeper than I thought." Layla's breath caught. Was she truly ready for her name to unravel everything? She leaned in, voice low. "Financial misconduct thrives in secrecy," she said. "Clients trust advisors with their life savings, and most don't understand how fees or strategies work. My father exploited that trust for decades, all while keeping up the image of a successful, respectable man." James scribbled notes, occasionally asking for clarification. His tone shifted. "This is a major story," he said. "A powerful firm, possibly fraudulent. led by a man whose public charm hides private cruelty. He looked up. "Are you prepared for what happens when this goes public?" Layla nodded slowly. "I understand the consequences. I have documentation for every claim about the firm. The personal side, that's harder. But my injuries speak for themselves." James hesitated. "And you're willing to go on record?" Layla paused. Her voice softened. "Not yet. I'd prefer to stay unnamed for the financial part. The assault charges will be public record anyway. I just need time before my name is tied to the investigation." James nodded. "We can work with that. I'll need to verify everything independently, and your father's company will get a chance to respond. That takes time. At least 2 weeks." "That's fine," Layla said. "I'm not chasing revenge. I want facts. I want truth that holds up when they try to bury it." James leaned back. "Are you sure this is what you want? Once this starts, there's no going back." Layla touched her cheek gently. The bruise had faded, but the memory hadn't. "I'm sure," she said. "The time for silence is over." That night, she checked into a hotel under a different name, turned off her phone. 3 calls, 3 steps. The gears of accountability had begun to turn. For the first time in her life, she had chosen truth over loyalty, integrity over appearances, and somewhere in Westchester, Frank Mallory was about to feel the ground shift beneath him. But would Layla's voice be enough to crack the foundation he'd spent decades fortifying? Or was this just the beginning of a reckoning no one saw coming? I hadn't realized how tightly the weight had gripped me until that deep, uninterrupted sleep. 12 hours of peace, a rare luxury. But as my phone buzzed awake, I was thrust back into chaos. 27 missed calls from my mother, 15 from my brother Kyle, and 5 from my father, despite the restraining order. Panic surged. My heart raced as I scanned the messages. "Layla Monroe, call immediately. Your father is furious." "Mom, what the hell did you do?" "Kyle Mallory, you've made a serious mistake. Fix this now." "I forwarded your contacts to Diana. You can't reach me." The noise of their urgency mixed with the silence that hung around me like a storm cloud. I glanced at the news. Nothing yet, but that wouldn't last. I had stirred the storm. 3 separate processes were set in motion, and I was bracing for whatever came next. Days turned into a week, and that week stretched into another. I told my new employer at Blackwood Financial that a family emergency had come up, and they surprisingly supported my leave. A month extension? No questions asked. Each day, I bounced from hotel to hotel, a safety measure Diana insisted on. I had to be careful. On the 10th day, the first headlines hit: "Financial services firm under investigation for alleged client fee manipulation." I didn't need my name at the bottom. The truth was out there. My father shot back with a statement declaring the reports were merely baseless attacks. But 10 days later, the game changed. Gordon, financial CEO, faces assault charges in domestic incident. A chill crept over me as I read the details. Public records, the restraining order, the evidence of all those years of fear now laid bare. The public would finally get a glimpse of who he really was. I had chosen truth over loyalty, and as Frank Mallory lay rattled by the first waves of this reckoning, I found a strange sense of power. Would my voice be enough to shatter the stronghold he had built? Or was I just facing the beginning of a storm no one was ready for? Layla Monroe sat in her childhood bedroom, feeling the weight of the past around her. Her fingers traced the grooves in an old wooden desk, the same desk where she spent countless afternoons avoiding her father's angry footsteps. Each thud in the hallway echoed like a thundercloud, tightening her stomach. Back then, she learned to hide behind her hair, effectively becoming invisible. But today, those echoes stirred a determination to reclaim her voice. She took a deep breath, letting the scent of dust and lemon polish fill her lungs. Could this finally be her moment? The silence shattered when the storm broke. Layla had chosen to confront the truth. Frank Mallory, her father, was now in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Assault charges in a domestic incident? The words reverberated through her mind. This chaos was her family's reality now, and it was almost poetic. Yet the tension escalated. Though the details remained murky, news spread like wildfire. Frank had been charged with assaulting a family member. Messages flooded her phone, some sympathetic, others accusatory for airing dirty laundry. Extended family members expressed shock, while former colleagues either feigned concern or showed curiosity about the scandal. Yet Layla followed Diana's advice. Silence was key during these legal proceedings. Only her attorney, Michael and James from the investigation, kept her updated. The gravity of the situation became palpable. Frank's company, Gordon Financial, saw its stock plummet by 30% as clients withdrew funds. Her father was forced to take a leave of absence, and her mother canceled her annual gala, citing family health concerns. Amidst the chaos, her brother Kyle's messages grew frantic. "Do you realize what you've done?" he pleaded in his final voicemail. Layla could hear the desperation in his voice as he blamed her for their family's unraveling. In his eyes, reporting violence was just spite. She realized how deeply Kyle had embraced their father's toxic beliefs, equating accountability with betrayal. 4 weeks since the initial charges, the investigation expanded to include the tax authorities. The full fallout had begun, and with it, her brave stand for truth. Was this the storm she had to weather to finally break free? Would her courage be enough to dismantle the lies that had bound her for so long? The echoes of her past now felt like a force propelling her forward, and she was ready to face whatever was coming next. 3 former employees stepped into the light, unearthing a mountain of misconduct. The moment their stories went public, the storm unfurled. A client had launched a class action lawsuit, alleging that Frank Mallory's firm was systematically overcharging and misrepresenting investment performance. Seeing my father shackled in handcuffs plastered across national business news, it was surreal. Meanwhile, my mother, sensing the ground beneath her shift, collapsed at a charity luncheon, igniting whispers of hidden substance abuse issues. Kyle Mallory, trying desperately to salvage the company, was witnessing his efforts crumble. Clients were flooding out the door, and regulatory scrutiny was tightening its grip. The board's decision: suspend all executive bonuses and dividends, effectively severing our family's main lifeline. Then it happened. My mother's voice crackled through the unfamiliar number, bypassing my well-established call blocks. "We know it was you," she spat, her tone sharp with rage. Yet there was something else, too. Fear. "You provided the evidence. You betrayed your family. Are you satisfied now that you've destroyed everything your father built?" I took a breath, steady yet fierce. "He destroyed it himself, Mom. All those years of questionable practices and treating people like they were just assets. He built a facade, not a family. He may have given you a lovely home and every advantage, but where was the respect, the love, the dignity?" The tears streamed as she cried, but they felt rehearsed, a tool to manipulate rather than a reflection of sorrow. "What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? Your inheritance?" "No," I replied, the fire in my voice unwavering. "I want accountability, for the clients whose trust was shattered, for the employees who faced bullying and threats, for every family dinner where I was belittled, every achievement brushed aside. Yes, even for the punch to my face when I dared to carve my own path." "One mistake," she howled. It echoed in the silence that followed. Each word was a calm storm, propelling me forward. Would I finally break free from these chains that bound me? Would my courage be enough to tear apart the lies? The echoes of my past had risen. Now I was ready to face them all. The sting of the kitchen table still lingered in her palm. Layla Monroe's eyes closed, and for a moment she was back there. The polished oak, years of silent dinners etched into its surface, the sharp bite of lemon on her tongue, something she hated, but swallowed just like everything else in that house. Frank Mallory's voice thundered off the cold tile, louder than the hiss of boiling water. His words rattled inside her chest. The faint smell of burnt toast, her mother's perfume. The rising tension just before Frank Mallory's fist slammed the table, the signal for her to disappear. That was the moment Layla Monroe's quiet resolve was born. She had learned to shrink herself in that house, to keep quiet, to play along with the lies, the illusions of a family that looked perfect from the outside but was a battlefield behind closed doors. Frank Mallory, the towering figure, was determined to keep his empire intact, no matter the cost. But deep down, Layla Monroe knew something had to give. Years later, her chance came. A choice. And this time, she wasn't going to back down. The call came one afternoon. Her mother, trembling on the other end of the line. "You did this, Layla Monroe. You betrayed us. Are you proud of what you've done?" Her voice was cold, accusing. But Layla Monroe was ready. "No, Mom," she said, calm but sharp. "You've been protecting him all these years, but it was him who destroyed us. He built this facade, this family, on lies. He never respected me, never loved me, and I'm done being silent." Her mother's sobs didn't move her anymore. It wasn't grief, it was manipulation. "What do you want, then? The inheritance?" Layla Monroe's voice cut through the fog. "I want accountability. I want you to see what you've protected all these years, his cruelty, his lies. I want the truth to come out." Her mother's voice cracked. "What did you do? You've ruined everything." "No," Layla Monroe answered, the weight of her words settling. "Your lies are crumbling, and I won't keep them standing any longer." She hung up, her heart pounding, but there was a strange kind of peace in the chaos. The weight of years spent trying to please them, trying to be the quiet, obedient daughter, had lifted. Now she was free. The next months weren't easy, but every day she built her new life, her own apartment, her own rules. Frank Mallory's empire started to crack as the truth bled into the open. He took a plea deal, avoiding a public trial but pleading guilty to charges that forever stained the family name. His fall from grace wasn't her fault, but it was the consequence of his own making. And Layla Monroe? She stood tall. For the first time in her life, she was free to define herself. No longer the girl who cowered in silence, she was someone who had found her voice and reclaimed her life. Layla Monroe stood frozen outside the heavy mahogany office doors, her pulse pounding in her wrists. Muffled shouts echoed like thunder from inside, while the sharp scent of her father's cologne wafted out, heavy and suffocating. The door creaked open, and she remembered the cold slickness of leather under her trembling hands, the ticking grandfather clock marking seconds of shame. That night she learned silence was a survival skill, but now the fire of revolt simmered just behind her tongue. In the aftermath, Layla was no longer the underestimated daughter. She had stepped into the light, ready to confront her family's dark legacy. Frank Mallory, her father, a man whose controlling nature masked his emotional distance, had kept the family's dysfunction under wraps for far too long. But it was time to expose what lay beneath the polished veneer of their lives. She had spoken her truth, and now the fallout was inevitable. The sentence given to Frank Mallory, once a powerful figure in a property management firm, was both a reckoning and a release. Probation, serious fines, and a permanent disqualification from leading any financial institution stripped him of everything he held dear. The family business? Sold off to a larger corporation for pennies on the dollar. Most of that money? Funneled toward settling client lawsuits spawned by years of unethical practices. Practices that Frank Mallory had enforced with an iron fist to maintain his reputation. Layla's mother, who had spent 3 decades protecting Frank Mallory's lies, found her social standing in shambles, along with her glorious lifestyle. She quickly filed for divorce. In the courtroom, whispers about her complicity emerged, revealing that she'd known far more than she let on. Was it worth it to cling to a privileged existence while ignoring the truth? Kyle Mallory, Layla's brother, felt the heat of their father's downfall too. His association with Frank Mallory made him an outsider in the industry. Job prospects evaporated, forcing him to accept a position with a distant relative's insurance company, far below his previous status. The family fractures deepened. Some saw Layla as the villain for revealing all, while others reached out, sharing their experiences of Frank Mallory's cruelty. Aunt Jean, her mother's younger sister, surprised Layla with a heartfelt email. "What you did took extraordinary courage," she wrote. "I wish I had found the strength decades ago. Your pain is not just yours. It echoes through all of us." Layla embarked on her own healing journey, working with a therapist specialized in family trauma. Each session peeled back decades of resentment, guilt, and grief for the family she had always wanted but never had. She found herself grappling with whether her rebellion was proportionate to the abusive violence from which she had escaped. But amidst the storm of feelings, one truth emerged. She was not alone. As the layers of her upbringing unraveled, Layla began to reclaim her life. No longer the girl who had cowered in silence, she stood tall, her voice now booming with conviction, echoing through the remnants of her past. Layla Monroe sat frozen on the edge of her bed, the letter crumpled in her trembling hands. Rain tapped gently against the window, a cold, gray light spilling over the room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reread the final lines of her mother's letter. "I still believe you went too far." The words twisted in her gut. Was this a sincere olive branch or another trap? Behind her, she could hear Frank Mallory's voice, loud, demanding, just like always. Would she reply? Or was it finally time to walk away? The past year had broken Layla, ripped apart the world she'd known. Her father's empire had crumbled. Her mother's complicity in his lies became public. Their once perfect family was shattered, and yet Layla stood tall. She had exposed their dark secrets, unraveling the lies they built their lives on. Friends came closer. A new job flourished, and for the first time in years, Layla felt free. But now, this letter. Was it a step forward, or just another game? Her eyes scanned the page again. Her mother admitted something new, something real. "I see now how we dismissed your achievements." Was this real growth, or a last-ditch attempt to regain control over her? Layla had spent months rebuilding, finding her voice, her worth. And this letter. It was something, wasn't it? But was it enough to fix a lifetime of damage? She paused, holding her breath. She didn't respond immediately. Not just yet. She needed time to process, to decide whether to let her mother into her life again, or to let the past finally die. Would she open her heart? Or was this the moment to close the door forever? The clock ticked louder as Layla sat alone with her thoughts. Layla Monroe stood in the hallway, sunlight streaming through frosted glass as her father's voice faded behind the shut door. The pulse in her veins steadied, once frantic with fear. Something within her fractured, but it was a good fracture, mending the pieces of her spirit that had long been suffocated. In the silence, heavy yet charged, she felt unburdened. Tears streaked her cheeks, not from defeat, but from relief and pride. The air felt different, electric. She exhaled deeply, finally belonging to herself, the only comfort she truly needed. The desperate hunger for approval from those incapable of giving it had transformed into something more profound, genuine self-respect. The journey had been brutal, riddled with pain that staggered her. Family connections severed, relationships forever altered. These were the costs, stark and real, and yet so were the gains. Authenticity, integrity, and the freedom to exist as her undiminished self. In the end, Layla discovered family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, support, and real love. The family she was born into had failed, but the family she was creating through meaningful friendships and healthy connections, that was nurturing her soul. The most profound lesson? Perhaps the simplest. We teach others how to treat us by what we accept, what we resist, and the consequences we establish. For 32 long years, Layla had accepted diminishment as the price of belonging, until that fateful moment when she refused to pay it any longer. That was when healing truly began. If you've ever faced a similar choice, caught between family loyalty and self-respect, know this: there's life on the other side of that difficult decision. It might not be the life you envisioned, but it could be the one where you can finally breathe. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself?